Hello aspirants and welcome. Today we're diving deep into part 1 of the Indian Constitution, which covers Articles 1 through 4. Now this isn't just another chapter to tick off your list. This is the absolute bedrock of Indian polity. Getting a solid grip on this is going to be crucial for your entire preparation journey.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the fundamental identity of India as a union of states. Then we'll get into the massive power that Parliament has to literally redraw the map of that union. We'll also look at the tricky business of exchanging territory, trace the history of how our states were reorganized, and finally, we'll wrap it all up by nailing down the critical difference between states and union territories.
Let's start with this incredibly profound statement from Dr. Ambedkar himself. You see, this isn't just about choosing words. It's a declaration of a core principle. Unlike, say, the United States, where different states came together and signed an agreement to form a federation, that's not what happened here. In India, the union came first. The country is one single, indivisible whole, and the states are simply administrative parts of it. This makes secession impossible and the union indestructible.
So how is this big idea actually written into the Constitution? Well, that brings us straight to Section 1, where we're going to break down the very first article.
Okay, so Article 1 does two very important things right off the bat. First, it settles the name of our country. It says India, that is Bharat, cleverly adopting both the modern and the traditional names. Second, it tells us what the territory of India includes, and it's broken down into three neat categories: the states, the union territories, and, looking to the future, any other territories that India might acquire.
Now listen up, because this is a classic prelims question, a real favorite for the examiners. You have to understand the difference between Territory of India and Union of India. The Territory of India is the bigger, all-encompassing term. It includes everything: states, UTs, the whole shebang. But the Union of India, that refers only to the states, which are the federal units of our political system.
All right, this leads us to the real powerhouse of Part 1, the incredible, sweeping authority that Parliament has to reorganize the states. And this is exactly where that famous phrase, the indestructible union of destructible states, really comes to life.
So how exactly does Parliament go about changing the map of India? Well, Article 3 lays out a clear two-step process. First, any bill that wants to do this can only be introduced after getting a thumbs up, a prior recommendation from the President. And second, before giving that recommendation, the President has to send the bill over to the legislature of the state that's going to be affected, so they can share their views on it.
And here is the absolute knockout punch. The state's view, it's purely advisory. It's not binding. The President and Parliament can listen to it and then completely ignore it if they want to. And to top it all off, this whole thing can be done with a simple majority vote in Parliament. It doesn't need a super tough special majority like a constitutional amendment under Article 368. This right here shows you the powerful unitary tilt within our federal system.
This line perfectly captures the entire philosophy. The union itself is permanent, it's indestructible, but the states, their boundaries, their names, even whether they exist at all, that can all be changed by the will of Parliament. This is a huge difference from a country like the USA, which is called an indestructible union of indestructible states. Over there, you can't alter a state's borders without its consent. Not here.
Okay, so that's all about internal adjustments, but what if we're talking about something bigger? What if we need to give a piece of Indian territory to another country? Does Article 3 cover that too? This was a massive constitutional question, and thankfully, the Supreme Court gave us a clear answer. In the huge Bharat Union case back in 1960, the Supreme Court made it crystal clear. They said that Article 3's power to diminish the area of a state doesn't mean Parliament can just give away sovereign Indian land. That's a much more serious act. Ceding territory, the court said, requires a formal constitutional amendment under Article 368. And we've seen this in practice, for example, with the 9th Amendment for the Bharat Union and the 100th Amendment for the land exchange with Bangladesh.
But, and in polity there's always a but, isn't there? The court later added a fine point. They clarified that just settling a boundary dispute with a neighboring country where you're not really giving away territory but just agreeing on where the line is, that's different. That can be done by the executive government through an agreement. No constitutional amendment needed for that.
All right, let's hit the rewind button and go back to the dawn of independence. Imagine the challenge. You have British India on one side and over 500 princely states on the other. How do you stitch this all together into a single, cohesive political map? That was the monumental task at hand.
You know, the original Constitution of 1950 didn't have the simple states and UTs we know today. Nope. Instead, we had this pretty complicated four-part system you see here on the screen. It was a bit of a temporary makeshift arrangement, really. A necessary compromise to bring everyone into the fold, but it was clear to everyone that this was not going to last.
Now, the pressure to redraw the map based on language was absolutely immense, especially from the southern parts of India. But at first, the leadership was very cautious. The first two committees, the Dar Commission and the JVP Committee, both said no to language, fearing it would break the country apart. But the popular demand was just too powerful. Finally, the Fazl Ali Commission was set up, and they found a brilliant middle path. They said, okay, language can be a major basis for reorganization, but they smartly rejected the rigid one language, one state idea.
So the Fazl Ali Commission's recommendations paved the way for the Historic States Reorganization Act of 1956. This was a huge moment, creating 14 states and 6 union territories. But believe me, the process of shaping India's map was far from over.
Just look at this timeline. It shows the living, breathing nature of Article 3. In 1960, Bombay was split into Maharashtra and Gujarat. In 66, Punjab was reorganized. Then in 2000, we got 3 new states, mostly for better administration and development. More recently, of course, Telangana in 2014. And then the massive constitutional change in 2019, when the state of Jammu and Kashmir was reorganized into 2 union territories. Each one of these is a story of Parliament using its power to redraw India's map.
All right, for our final section, let's clear up something that often causes a lot of confusion for aspirants. What really is the difference between a state and a union territory?
Let's just break this down nice and simple. The relationship a state has with the center is federal. They share power. But for a union territory, it's unitary. It's under the direct control of the central government. States have autonomy, UTs do not. The head of a state is the governor. For a UT, it's an administrator or a lieutenant governor, who is basically an agent of the president. And when it comes to making laws, Parliament's power over a UT is absolute. It can legislate on any subject it wants.
So, to wrap up our session, I want to leave you with this question to really think about for your mains preparation. Consider how Article 3, this power to create destructible states within an indestructible union, is the perfect example of India's unique character, a system that is federal in its structure but deeply unitary in its spirit.